Let's go JavaScripting! Hi everybody and welcome to another exciting edition of Boring JavaScript. I'm your host, the Virtuoid, aka Mike Smith, and today we're going to be talking about the get and set keywords, also known as getter and setter functions. Now what do they do? Well, you know that you can set properties on objects or classes, as we will in our example here, and you can write values to them and you can read values from them. But that's all you really can do with a property. Wouldn't it be wonderful that if you can get a value from a property or set a value from a property, a function automatically executes so that you can do other things with it? And that's what get and set allow you to do. So instead of just simply writing a value or reading a value, you can perform an entire function to be able to set the final value for that property or to deliver data off to the application. Want to see how it works? Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to look at is the get keyword or the getter function. But before we do that, let me kind of review very quickly what a property basically is. Now I'm going to be using classes here instead of objects, and what I'm going to show you here can also be used on objects, but we're going to use classes in this case here. As you know, I've got a class here and I've got two simple properties called name and tempf, and this is how you normally would define properties within a class construct. And so that means that I can access the property name, like on line 15 here, I can access the property tempf. Now, but notice here on line 15, I'm also accessing a property called myCat. Now this is the application. It doesn't know what's inside the class. So as far as it knows is I have a property called name, a property called tempf, and a property called tempc. But in the class definition, all I've got defined are two properties, name and tempf. Where does tempc come from? Well, that comes from the get keyword or the getter method. So when you use the get keyword, what it does is it tells JavaScript to say, okay, if somebody is treating the name of this particular function as if it is a property, I want you to execute this function and return whatever value you return from the function in this particular case. So in this particular case, I am doing a conversion from Fahrenheit over to Celsius. So from the application's point of view, all it really knows is, hey, I've got a tempc property, so I'm just going to call tempc. What the class will do is that it will automatically calculate tempc for you based upon tempf. So in this particular case, nobody ever has to set tempc. They can always just set tempf, and tempc will get calculated automatically. Yet from the application's point of view, it just looks like a normal everyday property. So you want to see how it runs? Sure you do. Let's go to node and let's type in node get. And yep, sure enough, there we go. All I did is just say get tempc, and boom, I've got the Celsius calculation. But I want to kind of point out one thing here that's very interesting is I've got this get function here, which basically tells me how to get a particular property on this particular object here. What I have done is I've created a read-only property. Because remember earlier I said we're going to be looking at get and set. And get obviously gets value, set sets a value into the property. I have no set here. I've just got a get. So I have basically created a read-only property. Both name and temp here are read-write. I can change the names anytime I want to, or read the names anytime I want to. But all I can do is just read tempc. You want to prove it? Let's do this. Let's do some code down here. Let's just copy it right to there. And as you can tell here on line 17, I'm changing tempc to 40. So normally, if this was a normal property, I would expect tempc to come back out as 40. Why? Because that's how properties normally work. I should be able to change them if they're public properties. Let's flip back over to node. And let's just clear the screen off and go back to node get. And no, that didn't happen. See, it is still saying 38.7222222 Celsius. And that shows you that this is a read-only property. Now, it didn't give you any kind of errors or anything. It just basically ignored line 17. So that's what the get function or the getter function allows you to do, is by using the get keyword, I am able to say, okay, treat tempc here as a property, and whenever anybody accesses that property, execute this function to return some sort of value. And that's how you use the get keyword, and especially how to create a read-only property. Now, let's take a look at the other side in writing it with the set, and that's next. So now let's take a look at the set keyword. Now remember, the get keyword allows us to be able to execute a function whenever the particular property is accessed. Well, the set function allows us to, or set method, set keyword, excuse me, allows us to execute a function whenever somebody changes the value of that particular property. So let's take a look at my animal class now. On this animal class, I've got my private name, my public name variable, and I got a private variable called statistics. Now, just kind of recap here, a private variable basically means it's a variable that is available only to this particular class, but is not available outside of the class. So if I was to say, if I come back down to here, my cat equals new animal, for example, I'm not able to access the statistics property because that happens to be a private property. So why have that in there? I'll show you that in just a second. So here is an example of the set method. Now, just like the set keyword. Now, just like the get keyword, the idea here is you tell JavaScript that, hey, whenever somebody accesses a property, execute a particular function. So where get does the access of the property, set says whenever somebody tries to change the value of the property, execute this function. So when I come down here and I say my cat temp f equals 101.7, it will execute this function right here and pass 101.7 as the argument to my function. And all I'm doing here is I'm setting the tempf property of the statistics private variable to tempf, and then I'm also setting the tempc property of the statistics private variable to a to a Celsius calculation. And that's really all there is to it. So again, if I ever attempt to change the value of the tempf property, I am telling JavaScript with this to execute this method or this function here. Same thing with the height. When I come down here and set height to 9.1, I'm going to execute this function, which is simply just going to change the height property of the statistics private property. And then when I set my cat weight to 7.9, it's going to simply execute the weight or execute the set weight method here, and we'll return we'll set the value of the weight property within the statistics private property. And then finally, I'm doing a get stats, which simply returns the statistics private variable. Now, again, why would I want to do that? Well, one of the cool things about doing these sets and the gets here is that you are now able to return anything. If I was able to say, get my name, I only get the variable that the name that's currently in the name. But when I say get stats here, I can return anything since it's executing a function. What if I wanted to do some more additional calculations before I returned anything? What if I only wanted to return temp f, height, and weight? What if I only wanted to return the temperatures? For instance, what if I had get stats temperatures or something like that? This will allow me to be, by saying just to get stats down here at the bottom, this will allow me to be able to control what properties I am returning or what data I'm returning from my particular class. And that's very powerful. That allows you to protect your data as much as possible and only give those consuming applications the data that they actually need. So that's basically what I have here. I have the 3 set methods to set the values, and I have the stats to be able just to get that stats variable. So really easy to use, just like with the get and set. I have set the new animal. Here's my public property for Fluffy. Here's my temp f, my height, and my weight. And as far as I'm concerned, as far as the application is concerned, these are just properties on this particular object here. I'm getting the stats. This will allow me to get the stats to be able to just get the data I want them to get. And then I'm just going to print it out. So let's see what happens. Let's go over to node. Let's type in node set. Yep. There it is. And you see here, I didn't set tempc, but it set it for me automatically because that was within the function of the setter method of the tempf. Now, just like with the get, something really fun has happened here. Is that when I have a get without a set, it's a read only. Well, what about a set without a get? Well, that's a write only. Why would you want a write only property? Well, that becomes very important. Let's just kind of give an example here. Is that you've got an application that is streaming data in from some sort of device. And some of that data within the device, you don't want the consuming program to know about. But you've got to collect it because you're eventually writing out to a database or something like that. But you got an application here that's getting a real-time report. You don't want to have them have access to all that data. So you will most likely have things like the sets or something like that to be able to set your data within within your particular class here, But when they get the actual information, you will only return to them what you want to return to them. And that's the real important thing about using the sets and the gets, is that you now have complete control over what you send over to the consuming application and how to interpret the data that's coming back into those particular properties. So just to kind of prove the point here, if I do a console.log my cat.tempf, I've set tempf here to 101.7. I should expect it to also say 101.7 there, but does it really? Well, let's flip over to Node. Let's clear off the screen and let's go back to Node set. And no, it doesn't. And again, why doesn't it do it? Because I don't have a getter method for tempf, only a setter method. So basically, a set without a get is a write-only property, and that's an absolutely powerful thing that you can use within your application. So that's really, that's how you can be able to use both the get keyword for doing getters on properties and the set keyword for doing setters on properties. And that's all there is for using the get and the set keywords in JavaScript. I hope you enjoyed our video. Hope it didn't bore you to death. Please view all of our videos at www.boringjavascript.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or check out everything we have at www.thevirtualoid.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you later.